What's up, y'all? Welcome back to In the Wild. Ray Sean here. So happy to have you back for another episode. I hope you're enjoying your fall semester so far. I surely am. And for today's episode, we are going to talk about a pretty timely topic, interesting one as well. It's about mental health and how mental health is one of the biggest challenges facing Gen Z right now, which, a lot of our college students are part of the Generation Z. And I think it's really timely, like I said, to kind of get into what's stressing students out and what the university does to support those students. So we have some really cool guests for you. First up is Dr. Taylor Rodriguez. She is not only a personal friend of mine, but she's a Double Jag. She attended here right around the same time as the consolidation along with me, and she graduated in 2016 as well as 2018 with her master's degree from here. And now she's about to embark a new journey with becoming faculty at a different university, which we'll get into that more for her interview. And we have a friend from Student Counseling and Psychological Services here to talk a little bit about what the university is doing to help you guys that are watching about mental health stuff. So it's going to be a great conversation. I hope you're ready, because here we go. Taylor, welcome to In the Wild.
Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you back on campus. I know it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Have you had a chance to see how much campus has changed since you've been here last?
Not a ton. I have heard through the grapevine some different changes and things, but I haven't explored too much yet. I might stop by some places after this.
Yeah, we got to give you a little bit of a tour. So you're a Double Jag, and when you were a student here, you were a very involved student leader. What were some of your, would you say, most iconic or memorable moments from your time of being a Jaguar?
Oh man, I had a blast here, so it's hard to choose just a few. Most of my favorite memories, though, are from the student programming board and planning events and being able to do pig out and see everyone, the event come to fruition and celebrate with people. All of my favorite memories are probably around that.
Yeah, because you did some of everything.
Yeah.
What motivated you to take on so many roles?
I think in the beginning, I really wanted to make friends. That was the primary thing. But I also was trying to develop some new skills, trying to figure out what types of things that I enjoyed. And I don't know, I feel like I've always been sort of an involved person, but I was trying to really kind of put myself out there and build my resume a bit and kind of go from there. And then it just kind of, I think, snowballed. It just kept adding things to the plate. So
it's addictive.
Yeah.
Once you get involved in one thing, you kind of just easily fall your way into a lot of other stuff.
No, 100%, yeah.
Because you did the crew, SGA.
Yep. Orientation leader for a little bit.
OL. Psych-Hi.
Yeah.
What am I missing?
Lumen Society, whatever it's called now. I forget the name of it now, but...
So some of everything.
Yeah.
And for today's topic, we're talking about mental health. Was there ever moments throughout your journey here where you felt like, okay, maybe I'm doing too much, or feeling like things weren't balanced, life was out of balance?
Oh, 100%. I think it's tough because obviously you're taking classes, you're trying to be academically successful, but I also was trying to be socially successful and building all these kind of skills and organizations up and doing all this stuff. There were a lot of times where I was like, oh, maybe I need to take a step back. And usually I noticed it when I was really exhausted. There were times I would fall asleep in class. I was just not keeping up with things in the same way. And I don't know, I never had it fully figured out, but it was definitely hard here and there for sure.
I think that's a good point of saying that you never fully figured it out. Yeah. I feel like just with adulting in general, you never fully figure anything out. You just kind of keep going and growing and just doing your best.
Yeah.
Do you feel like studying psychology at that time helped you at all? Learn how to balance things or give you a different perspective on things as you were going through it?
Yeah, I like that question. I think in undergrad, I became more self-aware in a lot of ways. I was looking at what I was doing and like I mentioned, the sleep thing, right? Like I didn't really realize that sleep was that important until I started taking some of the psych classes. But once I started my master's program, right afterwards, I started learning more specific like skills and things that were helpful, and kind of building my self-care repertoire, for lack of better words. So it helped a lot in that way. But in the beginning, I think it was just more of like a forced reflection for me. So
A forced reflection.
yeah.
Is there anything that you would do differently, looking back at undergrad?
I think that one thing that I wish I would have known better is how to say no and when to say no. And I think that's really tough when you're like, okay, this is a really good opportunity, or this is something I've been working towards for a while. And okay, yeah, sure, it's finals week, but I got to do this thing because it's important and it's going to add something to what I'm doing. But there were a lot of times that I feel like I could have still stayed involved and still stayed in my roles really well and done a little less, step back a little bit more, without having to just be like a yes person all the time. But saying no can be hard, and it wasn't something I really thought about as much as I did like moving forward into my PhD program and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that, because for me, I always felt so excited or honored that someone would just even think of me to do certain things.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I don't want to tell them no, because they may not ask me again, because this is their first time asking me for help or thinking of me for something that I, like you said, an opportunity that I may have wanted or was working towards, and I don't feel like I should say no.
Yeah.
But that might not come again.
Yeah.
For you, how do you kind of determine when is it right to say no, to, or I guess feel comfortable in saying no?
Yeah. I think, well, one thing I've learned is to like not say yes or no right away. If I have the space to like take a beat and say, let's revisit this, I'll do that. But I think it kind of comes down to, what are my goals and how is this going to facilitate that goal? And how does that align with kind of the bigger picture? And sometimes you do need to say yes to things, right? There are going to be times where it's just something that makes a lot of sense in the big picture. And there are other times where there might be some compromise. Maybe you do a little bit of percent of this and you kind of share the load for something else. But I always find myself asking back to like, okay, what's the big picture here? What are my short-term goals, and how is this going to help with my long-term goal? And what does my load look like right now, right? Like, and I'll say to people like, well, I'm excited that you asked me about that. Let me check my calendar and make sure I could actually do that in the next couple of weeks for you, and then I'll get back to them after that.
Yeah, for me, I definitely kind of default to the compromise of like, okay, well, I can't do this, but let me offer something that I can do to make it sound a little less disappointing, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not available on that date, but I am available here, that sort of thing. And what did your, I guess, experience look like with your professors and also, I guess, supervisors from being so involved, play in supporting just your overall well-being?
Yeah.
When you were here for not only undergrad, but master's too.
I'm glad you asked me about it, because I think when it comes to what helped me stay successful, it was my mentors and my professors, and leaning on my advisors. And a lot of times that relationship looked like them calling me out if I needed to, right? And like saying like, Taylor, you're looking extra tired today, or hey, I know that we've been talking about this thing, but don't you have like 3 other things you're doing this week, and stuff like that. It takes some time to build rapport with people and figure out who you can trust with kind of that vulnerability that comes with saying, yeah, you're right, maybe I am a little stressed out. But I always was able to find at least a couple people. Definitely there was one primary mentor I had in psychology. All of my student org advisors were really helpful. And so it was really about receiving the feedback, right? And being willing to kind of have that conversation and that vulnerability.
For sure. Is there anybody you want to shout out right now?
Yeah, Janelle Slavin-Mulford was one of my biggest rocks in psychology. She's fantastic. And yeah, she's the person that comes to my mind as like a most well-rounded mentor I had.
I love that.
Yeah, she's great.
And so now that you have your PhD, one, have you figured out how you want your students to address you? And 2, do you find yourself ever being put in a position of like, oh, your friends and family want to get like some therapy from you?
Oh, I love that question. The dressing thing is so weird. I still sign everything Taylor. And so I'm trying to, a lot of people will do like have undergrads say Dr. Rodriguez, and then maybe the grad students will call me Taylor. But I don't know. Ask me next month how I feel. I'll test some stuff out.
See how it goes?
Yeah, see how it goes. I do think that when it comes to being in psych, there is a tendency to be like, well, let's see what Taylor thinks about that. When it comes to my friends, my family, and if there's anything stressful going on, they'll be like, oh, I bet Taylor knows how to deal with that. Or I couldn't sleep last night. Maybe she knows this video I can watch to help my sleep. Like, I don't know, things like that. So I do find that I get a little extra phone calls here and there. But it'll even come from like if strangers figure out that I'm in psych.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, are you reading my mind? Like, can you tell me this thing? So it's one of those things that I think just kind of par for the course.
Comes with the field.
Yeah.
So what do you tell them when you just like, that's not even my thing. That's not my specialty. Like, I can't.
I say, we don't do therapy for our friends and family because there's too many conflicts of interest. I know too much about you. Like we need to take a step back. And sometimes I'll be like, I don't know, maybe try this video or things like that. But most of the time I'm just like, yeah. For strangers, I'll say, well, you better be careful. Maybe I am reading your mind, and play along with them sometimes. But
I better be careful.
Yeah.
And so you're about to embark on a new journey as professor.
Yeah.
Or assistant professor, I'm sorry. So what is that like? Or what made you want to go into teaching and not just practicing?
It's, I've always kind of liked the academic landscape, and I think it's one of the reasons why I stayed so involved in school and when I was here. I just like the vibes. I like being at a university. I like the students. I really enjoy it, and so I've always been kind of attracted to an academic route, but I'm also a little bit more research oriented, and so an assistant professor route lets me get some of the teaching and focus on my research, and if I want to see clients on the side, I can. I think it's just like a nice kind of flexible, well-rounded position. So I'm excited. It's going to be interesting. Like it's transitionary periods are always kind of weird, right? When you're saying like, how are they going to address you and all this kind of stuff. But I'm really excited. I've been working towards it for a while, so.
Yeah. And as your friend, I've been very excited to see the journey from us running around campus to now you having your own lab and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And teaching and doing all this stuff and being the old people in the room for the first time.
What would you say is the most exciting part with this new career journey?
I'm most excited about the mentorship aspect for sure. When it comes to mentorship, it could be like within my lab, of course, but I also think there comes, mentorship like I mentioned Dr. Slavin Mulford was for me as a professor and kind of helping guide me through my academics and kind of balance me out a little bit. That's what I want to be for people too. And so I think that's definitely the most exciting, to be able to kind of step into that role a little bit.
Yeah, I love that you took the positive experience that you had and now you're trying to, in a way, keep the cycle going or pay it forward in a sense to the next group of students.
You got to, right? I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here without all the people that supported me and pushed me and challenged me in different ways. And I think it's important to be adding to the positivity in our spaces, in our respective careers and fields. So I'm excited.
So switching gears a little bit into more of today's topic, where we're talking about mental health, in particular with Gen Z.
Yeah.
Because I feel like with this generation, mental health is being talked about a lot more than it probably ever has.
Yeah.
So just from your perspective, what's something that you find interesting about how mental health is perceived with the younger generations?
Yeah, I do think there's this shift, right, of like having so much more access to information and access to other people's experiences and being able to kind of connect with people who are maybe kind of in a similar boat to you. And so because of that, there is this piece that I do think it's more normalized now. Like it can be talked about a little bit easier. People maybe have less stigma about mental health and that kind of thing. But the other side of that too is that we have a lot of influx of information that maybe isn't research-based, or maybe is just kind of lore, for lack of better words. And so there's kind of this double-edged sword where we get inundated with so much information, it can be hard to kind of parse apart different things too.
For sure. Do you feel like in mental health awareness that in some ways is taking a little bit of a left turn, where, as you said, like, people can't parse through all the stuff, and so now they're being hit with maybe terms or being diagnosed with stuff that they don't really have? What are your thoughts on maybe too much awareness?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of good research to tell us directly what does that relationship look like, but I do think there's kind of, for the younger folks that I've seen in therapy and things, there's a lot of times some of the social media can add to the anxiety around what they're experiencing, and it's kind of like WebMDing yourself when you're not feeling that well, and you're like, oh gosh, I've come to the worst possible conclusion. I'll never get better.
I have 3 days to live.
This is it. Let me write my will real quick. I think it's kind of similar to that, and like I said, there's not a lot of good research right now because social media age is so new and all of that. But I do think that there comes this piece of extra stress from just the level of information and how much of a rabbit hole you can get on TikTok and things like that too.
For real, even though not necessarily for mental health, I've fallen into a couple TikTok black holes.
Yeah, so it's hard to reset your algorithm too. After you've gotten down a couple, it's just like, wow, this is where I live for about a week.
So I guess what would you recommend for students who may be watching this and need to help parse through some of that? What advice would you give them where it's like, hey, I'm being told I'm a narcissist and I'm toxic and all of these other things. I don't know what these terms mean fully.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to fact check, which sounds so basic, but really to be able to do a little bit of a search where you're on a .org website and you're looking at some other information that's not just people's personal take on things, I think is really important. And also just remembering that if you're super concerned about something, you're noticing patterns, or you're kind of stuck in this kind of rut or anything like that, you could always reach out to a counselor or somebody like that to get a little bit of reassurance, right? And kind of that verification. We can have conversations and help dispel some of the stress pretty easily. And I mean, campus services are easy to access. And so that's what I would recommend. Doing a little bit of fact checking and then kind of zooming out if you need to.
Of course. So I have another, I guess this is more of a wild topic of a question for you. So what would your recommendations be for folks who are saying I use ChatGPT as their unofficial therapist because they may not have the access or for whatever reason because of the convenience? Yeah.
It's so interesting because I have seen so much content on this, and sometimes I do think the ChatGPT responses are kind of nice. They're kind of feeding into a lot of positivity, and they'll sometimes challenge any kind of negative perceptions you have about certain things and stuff like that. So sometimes I'm like, oh, that's kind of a nice response. But I think where the problem happens is if you're only relying on this one source of information where there's no human connection, there's no kind of room for the nuance of having information outside of just what you're feeding into it, right? It's just feeding back what you're giving it. I think it can get kind of muddy and maybe less helpful, right? Because you're feeling secure in this interaction, you're feeling oh, I'm doing something because I'm talking to ChatGPT, but maybe it's not giving you the most useful tools. And so I don't know. I think when it comes to access and things, it's really tricky, but there are more online services available now. In our post-COVID time, you can kind of expand from there. Group services are sometimes a little bit easier to get into with less of a wait list and things like that. And so ChatGPT can pull information about resources and things. So maybe I would recommend asking them what they recommend around your area and things like that.
So asking ChatGPT for resources instead of being the resource.
I mean, if we're in a ChatGPT age, right? We got to use it in a way that is useful. And I think if we rely on any one thing too much, it can be a little bit difficult to kind of zoom out of that a little bit.
Right. And I also think as someone that has experienced therapy with ChatGPT, like you said, like it only goes off what you're feeding it.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to therapy than just literally you telling your therapist something, like, you know, body language and just how your appearance. So like all the things that, you know, you don't necessarily directly communicate, your therapist, you know, they make note of.
I also think that there's something to be said for having a therapist that like challenges your perspective a little bit and like kind of gives you a little bit of pushback on certain things. And you're not going to really get that as much with ChatGPT unless you're like, hey, there are these two sides. Give me an argument for both sides or something like that. And I don't know, you're kind of having to like orchestrate it. And at that point, you put in a lot of effort. So you might as well just...
Yeah, and it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to say, can you challenge me with my perspective here?
Yeah, it just seems complicated to me. There's no ChatGPT research on that yet, though. So ask me in a couple years.
You know, look, the way it's been moving, probably just a couple weeks, and then they'll have a better answer for you. Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for chatting with me. Wishing you the best as your tenure as assistant professor at the University of Mississippi. And just thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks for having me. This has been a blast. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, y'all, stay tuned because we got more when we come back.
A movement starts with purpose, a reason to come together. Cancer impacts us all, but together we can change the future. Paceline is a movement of communities and organizations setting the pace to end cancer. Every year, we join forces as teams and individuals to make an impact. 100% of every dollar raised fuels innovative cancer research at the Georgia Cancer Center. Research that leads to breakthroughs, brings hope, saves lives. And now, that movement is growing. Whether on 2 wheels or 2 feet, you choose how to be active. Because every pedal, step, and mile makes a difference. We walk, we run, we ride, we move with purpose. We set the pace to end cancer. Because together, we are stronger. Together, we are Paceline.
Bayo, welcome to In the Wild. Excited to have you.
Thank you.
And diving right in, how did your journey with counseling begin?
My journey with counseling, well, as I've mentioned, was born in Nigeria and lived there up till my late teens when I came to the US to study. And growing up, I just could see in the 80s and 90s, there just wasn't much of an established counseling field in Nigeria where I grew up. And I could just see that people were really struggling but had no outlets. And I started to kind of do research, just talking to people, finding out like, how do people deal with like frustration? How do they deal with stress? And I found people, essentially describing, things like staying busy, working hard, distracting myself with my duties and my daily tasks. And I figured that there had to be something else. There had to be something outside of those things. And so I graduate high school, I start university in Nigeria studying law.
Studying law.
Studying law, yeah. My older brother had studied law. He didn't kind of complete his program. And so my parents had always kind of hinted that like, hey, if you wanted to study law, you could go right ahead with that. So I kind of started my educational kind of trajectory thinking I was going to be a lawyer. But in about the equivalent of the 9th or 10th grade, I had started applying to universities in America and applying for scholarships. And I was lucky enough to get one of those. And the moment I got the scholarship, I asked my mom if she would let me go and if she would let me study something else. And she was like, yeah, if you get the scholarship and you make it work, absolutely go for it. So I started researching what would be a way to help people deal with stress, in America if you were studying. And I discovered psychology. And the rest is history. At one point, I thought I was going to be a researcher in psychology. And as I got into my undergrad program, I realized that I was more inclined towards being a clinician, being a therapist, and the rest is history. Here I am.
And I guess what kind of led you to wanting to work with college students or college age students?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had actually graduated with my bachelor's, and I started working in the metro Atlanta area. I was working with an organization that provided something called wraparound services. These are supplemental services that children and families need to be able to thrive in their communities. So counseling services, support services like education-focused support services, all kinds of resources in the community, whether it's related to, being connected to the food drives and the places they could go to for academic support. So what we were doing was providing them with mental health services. The Children and Teenager Foundation was the organization. Doing that, I was working primarily with kids and their families. And when I had an opportunity to go back for graduate studies, I got the opportunity to work with the counseling center at the university I went to, which was West Georgia in Carrollton.
Okay.
And I interned with the counseling services over there, and I just noticed a significant difference between the way I was connecting with, the students, the kind of emerging adults between the ages of about maybe 16 and about 24, 25, versus the kids and families I had worked with previously. And so I knew that I had a strong affinity towards, working with young people who could, have a bit more autonomy and make their own choices, and really kind of put the counseling, the information and the knowledge they gain from counseling into practice in their daily lives. That just seemed, I guess that's a sign that I needed the instant gratification of seeing them make progress in their lives in that way. So. Yeah.
Okay. And kind of going into our topic for today, where we're talking about Gen Z, is there common things that you're seeing, or what's the most common thing that you're seeing for those students who come to you, part of Gen Z, with their mental health concerns?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gen Z is a really remarkable generation. I think they are maybe the first generation that has always experienced the internet throughout their lives. And, they very much live in that digital world. I myself, I'm not very active on social media. I had a little stint there where I was, but I think I've kind of grown out of that part of my life and aged out. But ultimately, I see that a lot of the ideas, a lot of the communication styles, a lot of the things that are, meaningful and valuable to their population seems to be originating and taking place on the internet. What that means is you meet a Gen Z person and they can really describe their feelings, right? They can really communicate to you, what they're experiencing and how it's impacting them. But because they don't have as much of an emphasis throughout the scope of their lifespan, really engaging with each other in person, because of a lot of the interaction that takes place on the internet, they seem to sometimes have challenges communicating with one another what those feelings are, right? And how to kind of manage the challenges they have with the range of feelings they have, or the complexity of experiences they have. And so what I think I've begun to notice, even in the course of my short career, is that I encounter these young people who really can express themselves and really are open to the idea of sitting down with someone and engaging and exploring and, really trying to understand what their experience is and how it connects to other people. But haven't had many opportunities to do that, and maybe don't even know, even though they understand that like it's okay to do it, there's not as much stigma as there used to be. They just haven't had a lot of practice, and so they really don't know how to ask for that help, even though they recognize that they might need it, right, and they can express it. So just helping them navigate their thoughts and feelings, and helping them, share those with their peers or with, friends and family. That has been a very unique kind of experience with Generation Z so far.
What are some of the common stressors or concerns that they come to you with that you've seen so far?
Yeah, I'd say earlier in my career, depression seemed to be the primary concern that a lot of the clients we would work with would be, struggling with. More recently, particularly, when we look at college students, anxiety seems to have taken over as the primary concern that they seem to be struggling with. And again, I think that comes from, the experience of, having all these thoughts and feelings, having the vocabulary to kind of express this, but not really knowing how to convey that to the people in their environments. I think there are all kinds of pressures that come with being in a college environment. So in some ways, it's very normal to be stressed out in college. But I think also Gen Z is at this pivotal developmental stage where they're finishing high school, they're kind of gaining independence, trying to kind of figure out a lot of, lifelong decisions right at this point. They're coming to college and, a pandemic happens, there are all kinds of, stressors with the climate and with the financial difficulties they're facing. So they do have some unique challenges that I think contribute to that anxiety that they struggle with.
So student counseling is here to help students. If you could just walk me through the process. So what is it like if I'm a student, I'm feeling anxious, overwhelmed, stressed out, burnt out, and I want to get help from student counseling? What does that look like?
Yeah, there are a few different ways that students end up, maybe getting connected with us. The students who may be well informed and may know about the resources on campus will sometimes just, go on the internet, look at the website, learn about what mental health resources are available on campus. They might get connected to our office. They have an opportunity to read through, the services we provide, read through the bios of the staff members, and then they usually can just give us a call. Some students will send us an email, asking for, information on how to get in touch with us. And some students will just kind of show up, at the front desk and say, hey, I'd like to, learn more about the services, or I'd like to meet with a therapist. In cases where students are, going through stressors and they may not know what resources are available on campus, we really rely on the campus community to help kind of direct them to whatever resources they need, whether it is mental health care services that we provide or additional services on the campus. I think of, for instance, we have, a food bank on campus where students can go if they're having serious difficulties, financially or just taking care of themselves. They can get connected with the Office of the Dean of Students and get whatever services they might need. They can get direction that way. So yeah, we encourage students to kind of look out for one another. If you find out your classmate or your roommate or your friend is having mental health challenges, tell them about the counseling services on campus. If they're comfortable, maybe walk them down, come along with them. We've had a lot of cases where, someone recognizes their friend is having some kind of distress and they'll show up to the appointment with their friend just to make sure they get there, safe and sound. And, the person in distress has the opportunity to determine if they want their friend to come in with them or they want to come in solo, and engage in whatever services might be the best fit for them, by themselves at that time.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And what do you think are some things that students may overlook or not think about when it comes to their own mental health and just like well-being?
Yeah. I think stress in general. I mentioned some of the ways in which young people today are really being challenged in a way that maybe some older generations may not have been dealing with at these pivotal developmental stages. I think a lot of those stressors show up in the way they interact and interpersonal relationships. It shows up in the financial stressors that a lot of students are facing. I've had a lot of students talk to me about being away from home and having a lot of homesickness lately as well, especially post-pandemic. There were a lot of students who were kind of ready to be out of the home because, they had felt trapped for those few months where we're all, kind of resigned to our homes. But at the same time, leaving home and leaving a lot of the security and familiarity of those spaces and suddenly being back out in the world, it's taking some adjustment for many students to get used to interacting and sharing space, having a roommate. And so a lot of social anxiety. Yeah, that seems to be, I seem to be encountering that more and more with the clients I work with, where this didn't seem to be as much of a case a decade ago.
And so I also want to talk about something that's a little exciting about your transition into the Counselor Education Training Center. Do you mind sharing to our audience what that is and how might they be able to use those services?
Yeah, absolutely. The Counselor Educator Training Center is it's going to be a program, an initiative connected to the College of Education, specifically the Research, Counseling, and Curriculum department. Is trying to provide the counselor education students with a training facility where they can develop their counseling skills, all the knowledge they're getting throughout the course of their program, doing the didactic learning. They now have a space and an opportunity to put some of that work into practice. And so as coordinator of that program, I will be guiding their learning process. I'll also be in class with them, providing some instruction, but it's going to be an opportunity for it's important to kind of make the point that the training center is not going to be a replacement for the counseling services that students already have access to through the Student Counseling and Psychological Services Office. But this will be a supplemental resource for mental health care, primarily for the students on campus, but potentially for the Augusta community at large, because the training process for these students is going to benefit from having our student population, but will also require that they know how to provide services to the full kind of range of the client base they'll be working with, right? So from children who might need mental health support services all the way to maybe the elderly, as well in the community.
I like that. Yeah. And I think that that program will be very helpful.
Absolutely.
They get to train before they go out into the wild. With their own clients.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, I have some phrases here that I want to play a little game with you.
Oh, okay.
We're calling this game Wild Takes. So I wanted to get your hot takes on some of these words and how the public or maybe online on social media might be using or misusing them. All All right, so for your first wild take is the word toxic.
Oh,
What do you think about that word?
Yeah, that is probably one of the most overused terms. I hear that word so often, and I think, toxic has become a term to use to describe behavior that is just undesirable, or that people might find offensive, right? And in the context of counseling, yeah, toxic does have a specific meaning, right? Toxic relationships or toxic interactions tend to be interactions that will have a detrimental impact on both the person who's engaging in them and those who might be on the receiving end, right? And usually when I say detrimental, I do mean like there will be mental health consequences for all people involved in that relationship, right? I think a lot of the time people will just use that term to describe, I don't like the way that felt, or I don't like the way that person responded to me, or the way they looked at me, that was toxic. But yeah, it's actually meant to describe something much more specific. Yeah.
Next up is self-care.
Self-care. Yeah, self-care is another, these are great terms. These are absolutely great terms. Self-care has become a kind of throwaway word used to describe just anything that feels good, right? Focused on the self, right? So, had a really busy day, want to take care of myself, I'm going to eat this tub of ice cream because, this is my version of self-care, right? That seems to be the way that people use the term, is like whatever feels good, just kind of give it to yourself. Of course, in the context of counseling or mental health or psychology, self-care is specifically meant to be a practice that is, it's healthy, it's not going to be detrimental, it's not an overindulgence, right? There are going to be, no consequences for you engaging in this activity. And it's focused on helping you, thrive, helping you flourish, helping you cope with the challenges that you are going through. So it's really important that when we, for instance, engage in self-care, we're not engaging in things just because it's convenient or because it feels good, but it really has to serve a positive impact for us in the short term and in the long term.
I like that.
Yeah.
Next up, and I feel like this is another one that's like used a lot, is gaslighting.
Gaslighting. Yeah, gaslighting. I think I actually don't know the history. Let me say this. I've recently learned the history of the word gaslighting, but I've never actually taken the time to research whether this is a term that originated in the counseling or mental health fields. My understanding is that this term comes from theater and film, and apparently this was the title of a movie where gaslighting took place, and I guess it's been used to describe that behavior where a person is made to believe that their reactions and their thoughts and feelings are somehow false or inaccurate because the other person is kind of manipulating them into doubting themselves and doubting their impressions. So I'm not exactly sure how that became such a powerful mental health and like counseling descriptor at this point. But yeah, gaslighting I hear that being used all the time. It's being thrown around so conveniently. And I'm not sure that every behavior that is described as gaslighting actually would meet the criteria for what gaslighting appears to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I see people using that term and I'm like, well, I think that person is just lying.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Doesn't seem like it's gaslighting, it's just you're just not telling the truth.
Yeah, or you have different opinions, you have different perspectives,
too, yeah.
And they just see something different from you. Doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to manipulate you or confuse you. So yeah, the specifics matter in that context.
Okay, next up is the word boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah. Boundaries. That's another really good one. I also hear boundaries being used kind of mistakenly, right, to describe people wanting to kind of sidestep responsibility in some cases. I think it's great that like there's an awareness of the concept of boundaries, right? Because we do need to maintain our autonomy and maintain the things that are within our control and the things that are our rights, to practice or to not practice or to not engage in or to not experience even. But again, I've heard people in everyday life, describe boundaries as, things that they're just not interested in engaging in, even when they might have a responsibility or a duty to take on that role or to take on that activity. Boundaries are really meant to describe a violation of, an act or, a territory that is within one's autonomy to engage in or to not engage in, right? And that sometimes gets misused.
Yeah, and I sometimes have seen people with a lot of unspoken boundaries. And so they try to hold people accountable for things that are unspoken. And it's like, well, your boundary needs to be, like, you got to tell them about the boundary before you hold them accountable.
Yeah. Communication is a key part of, kind of recognizing what your boundaries are and kind of sharing them with other people. It has to be communicated.
Next up is PTSD.
Ooh, PTSD. Yeah. Trauma in general, that has become such a big part of the way we understand things. Just the other day, I was having a conversation with my colleagues about the term trauma bonding and how trauma bonding has really been misunderstood in the way that it's used and the original meaning, right? Trauma bonding is usually a phenomenon that takes place where one person who is perpetuating abuse or some kind of mistreatment to someone else suddenly becomes appreciated or cared for or connected with by the person that they are exploiting or that they are traumatizing. In the context of, I think, popular culture and the way that it's used, trauma bonding just means that we experienced a difficult experience together, and so somehow we're connected and we're friendly. There isn't that, hierarchy of power and abuse that's taking place. So PTSD in general, I think, is also misunderstood in the same way that when people have difficult experiences, I think they automatically think that if I remember it, or if it's something that upsets me when I remember it, that is trauma. That is post-traumatic stress disorder, and that isn't necessarily the case, right? There's an actual criteria that you have to meet to kind of qualify as PTSD. In actuality, I've heard other mental health professionals, just kind of to address that misunderstanding, I've heard other mental health professionals describe, instead of just dismissing what clients say as like, oh, I have PTSD about this or I have PTSD about that, helping them understand that, like, there's PTSD and then there's the small t, not quite the capital T,
the lowercase
trauma,
t.
the lowercase t kind of trauma where you've had a difficult experience and it still upsets you, it still impacts you. Might not be PTSD, but it's still relevant and legitimate,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And last one before we run out of time, narcissist.
Ooh, narcissist. Yeah, this is another really popular one. I mentioned I'm not on social media, so I don't get the full brunt of this, but what I've come to understand, particularly being in the classroom with students, is how frequently they encounter those terms on the internet and how much they find themselves using the term to describe others, right? A narcissistic person is someone who meets a particular criteria for being mostly incapable of really empathizing with the experiences of others and really exploiting others for their own, for their own ego and, for their own needs. And not everyone who does something selfish is narcissistic, right? We all kind of display narcissistic kinds of behaviors, but we don't necessarily meet the criteria for narcissism just because we're selfish or we're self-focused. And so it's important that when we use these terms in like everyday life, we recognize that they have a meaning, right? And that meaning comes from a context like mental health care, like psychology. And so if they really want to communicate what they're thinking or what they're feeling, it might be more effective to describe their thoughts and feelings. I feel A, B, C, D, E when you do A, B, C, D, E. I feel, this, or I feel that. Versus, oh, you're a narcissist because I experienced this, so you're a narcissist. It's always, I think a wise move to try to express oneself and try to communicate one's thoughts and feelings instead of just kind of name calling.
Well, thank you so much, Bayo, for chatting with me. For everyone that's watching, I hope you, if you need, check out student counseling as well as the Counseling Education Training Center.
Thank you.
All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I certainly did, learning some new phrases, catching up with Taylor. Shout out to Bayo from Student Counseling, as well as the CETC, is what we call the Counseling Education Training Center. That's going to be some really exciting stuff for our counseling education students. And if you are someone who may be struggling or curious about the services that the university provides, please don't hesitate to reach out to someone to check them out. We'll put some resources up here on top of me to help you guys out. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Jags!